You want to learn how to treat intrusive thoughts? If you watch the whole video, you will learn how to treat painful thoughts and false urges, especially related to sexuality and morality. I was diagnosed with severe OCD and then was treated by one of the best OCD specialists in Canada, and I later tested within the general population after a year of treatment. So I know what it takes to treat OCD successfully from experience. I still live with manageable amounts of obsessions and compulsions, but I know what they are now and I know what to do about them. OCD is like other mental issues. After a certain degree, being afraid becomes anxiety, being sad becomes depression. They're all normal up to a point, and everyone gets a piece of them. And I know you're suffering, we are too, but you can learn what this is and you can embrace the challenge and get healthier. But it is hard, which is why I brought Matt on to teach and inspire and entertain. Matt's got OCD, a great therapist, and lots of wisdom from experience fighting this dragon too. Let's see if I can bring Matt on. Invited you. And I wanted to welcome new people. We've got lots of people messaging us saying, hey, we're new to this. We're surprised and horrified by intrusive thoughts, and they don't know where to start. Matt, I'm waiting for you to accept. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Go ahead and say hi, and we'll make sure the audio works.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that works pretty well. Okay, I just got to make sure my camera is good. Some people are saying, like, they're new. I'm just finishing kind of the intro before we really get into it. They're saying, hey, my theme is the worst. I can't hide mine and look normal. And mine makes sense. It's possible. Do you have what do you think about that?
Well, two things. First, I'll say I can definitely relate to that it's possible because that's what OCD does, right? It comes up with all these what seem like plausible scenarios, right? Like it's possible that this bad thing or thing that you're worried about could happen. And you know what? Like, to be honest, that is the case. Like it's possible. I mean, it's possible right now. Some aliens could arrive on Earth and zap us all. Like, you couldn't definitively say that might not happen. Like, so whatever you're thinking about, it probably could happen. So I can definitely relate to the possible thing, and we can talk about how to deal with that. The second thing around the theme, like, oh, mine's worst, or what was it? Something like that, like mine, I can't hide mine. Or I think we're going to get into that too, is that the theme really doesn't matter. Was what I've learned anyway. And that however much you're convinced that your theme is real and is worse than someone else's, it's not. And whatever.
Well, it's almost like wait a few months and you'll get the next one. But they don't.
That's right.
This is why I said, like, this is kind of for new people coming in. Just kind of get used to this level of intensity, and this is something we hear all the time, and it does tie in. Well, how about we'll wait? Well, let's get right into it. So this is content versus process, right?
Sure. Yeah. So that's something that, like, my therapist, who I started seeing in March this year, really taught me a lot about, because I would always, talk to him about, like, I have for the most part contamination OCD, which also is kind of linked to harm OCD, in that I'm worried that somehow I'm going to get contaminated and then contaminate my kids and they'll get cancer and they'll die or something like that, right? So, and it's going to be my fault, right? And I should have done more to protect them. And so that's kind of my theme, right?
Well, as a side note, though, aren't your kids constantly like, come on, like, why are we being so careful?
Oh, yeah. Like they're aware of it and everything. Like, they're half the time they're like, oh, I'm not worrying about it. And they get mad at me and they go and they go and touch whatever, like, I told them not to on purpose. And I'm like, oh no, now I made it worse because I brought it up and they wouldn't have touched it again if I hadn't said anything. And I'm like, oh no.
The best is the oh, I made it worse, because then you're mad at yourself for caring, and it's so funny.
Oh yeah, like that happens all the time. But yeah, like so that's my content. And as we know with OCD, there's so many different themes, right? There's relationship OCD, there's like violence thoughts like harm OCD, like, there's all sorts of sexual related thoughts OCD. There's, oh, it has to be just right. Something has to feel just right. I mean, the list goes on, like checking OCD, obviously, like there's so many. So anyway, when I was talking to my therapist about this, he said, look, I'm going to tell you something. He said, all this content you're talking about, like these things, he said, and he said, don't take this the wrong way. He said, it's garbage. It's all garbage. And he said, if you try to solve this problem, like through analyzing and reanalyzing the content and why something is safe or not safe, or he said, you're going to get nowhere. And because OCD always has another what if. You think you've solved it, you go, oh, it's all going to be okay because X. And then 5 minutes later, well, what if Y happens, right?
What really helped me was setting boundaries. Like, every night I have to, well, get really close to going to bed at midnight, which means I can't be doing compulsions till beyond that.
Right.
And it means, and so the deadlines, and I have to be up by 7:30, and I have to, and by having those deadlines, it cuts down on the amount of time. Otherwise, without those boundaries, you'll invent some reason to be like, well, of course I have to wash this again.
Exactly. So you're right. There's always another. So my therapist said to me, he thinks of OCD in that, and I can talk a little bit about how my themes have changed over the years, is, like a street sweeper, street cleaning truck, like they have those brushes, like those horizontal brushes that go close to the sidewalk and they go like this, and they go round and round sweeping the street to clean it, right?
Yeah.
He said, that's your OCD. Like that's the process in your brain, is that you're walking around and your brain's just going round and round. And then whatever OCD happens to, like whatever it picks up on, it gets swept up. Like it gets swept up by the street cleaner, and then it's in, and then you're locked, right? And then you're going to ruminate on whatever that is. And then the next day you go to clean the street and you might pick up on something else, right? And so what he's saying is whatever you pick up, whether it's any one of these themes, it's all the same in terms of the way that you think about it, right? That you ruminate and so you said, forget the whatever you picked up. You can pick up anything. It's random, like whatever your theme happens to be. Like, so that's why forget about the content, what the street sweeper is picking up, and think about more the process of that sweeper going around and around and around, and that's what you need to stop. Right?
I think, yeah, I mean, because this is really geared at a bunch of new people messaged in. And so there's a couple things to really notice. And one is, what's the content? Like, what's your theme? And we're going to go through a whole bunch of them because we got a lot of questions. And then two, what's the process? Because often the theme will change, and then the process of the washing machine, if you can go, oh, I'm just, and we'll go through each one by one, but keep in mind theme or content, and then process, because brain lock says a lot of what you mentioned. It's garbage, what you're doing, the compulsions. And your therapist said something else that's straight out of brain lock. I can't remember. Oh, well. So, how was your holidays? I mean, most people with OCD dread the holidays. Did anything of note? I just have it in my notes to ask.
Yeah, it was pretty quiet this year. Obviously, with we're in lockdown here in Ontario, so no one's really go. I didn't really have anywhere to go anyway. Like my family doesn't live in Ottawa, so it was pretty quiet with my girls. It was quiet and peaceful. So yeah, that's nice.
Oh, well, it sounds like you got off easy, because we got a deluge of messages about intrusive thoughts. So
I have more. The holidays for me right now, and I'm happy to talk about this if it comes up, is it's kind of a bit of a tough period for me because I lost my wife 2.5 years ago, and it was around this time of year. So that kind of tends to overweigh things. And but yeah.
That's brutal. Well, it's one of those things where it's like none of us have it easy. Like if you're watching this, like we live in a constant difficult state, so it probably makes holidays even harder because you've got that layer of weight that you're probably remembering all those things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's true. My OCD was worse. It's over December, and I was expecting it to be because of that extra kind of. I don't feel great at this time of year. So, but like I said, I think with Christmas being so low key and not having to, you know, go and be around tons of people and everything and all different family members, like I think it was nice just to be with my daughters and it was quiet. So that was nice.
Cool. All right. So sorry to hear that. That's rough.
That's okay.
Um, we've got our first question. Really, it's about fear of loss. Now,
Yeah.
we have previously talked about your wonderful cashier experience where he contaminated your pink towels. You
Yes.
paid for them and you abandoned them
Yeah.
in a parking lot to some lucky person who now is, romping around with your pink towels.
Yeah.
We got a question.
But they're contaminated, you know, so
I mean, yeah. Well, it's funny, like contaminated to us is like
yeah.
clean to someone else,
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, so someone wrote in, and I love this because I mean, I scan after I go to the cash. I
Yeah.
don't, I've got fear of loss, and it's
Okay.
not just things, it's also, did I forget to do something?
Yeah.
And Grayson's book, Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, has got its own little
Yeah.
chapter on it. It's a little chapter, though. Anyway, so we've got someone writing in saying, I always look suspicious checking the counter in stores. Like, I can't leave. I make up questions so I can just keep looking, or I pretend something's in my shoe to buy time.
Yeah.
One time, the salesperson thought I was stealing, putting things in my boots. I'm afraid of losing something, forgetting a credit card at the counter. Everything feels important, like even a piece of random paper. I don't want to leave it behind. I'm addicted to the feeling of just right, and I can't like waste or throw anything out. And this is the good news is like you're in the right spot
Oh
here.
yeah.
This is
Yep.
OCD.
Classic.
Do you
This,
do you
this
have
is
this, or do you have any insights on hearing
no.
that?
No, I don't have this. I mean, I've had, yeah, sometimes like I'll have to, it won't be at the cash, but I'll have to go back to my car a couple times to check whether I locked it or to check that I didn't leave my phone or something in it on the back seat that someone will see and they'll steal it or something. And, you know, so is there anything on the back seat? Do I just go and check, and do I need to put it in the trunk, like where it's out of sight? I do that sometimes, but I don't have this specific theme like at the cash. But as I said at the beginning, I can talk about it from the point of view where I feel like the theme doesn't matter. Like this one is a classic. I feel like, well, not easy, but relatively easy to analyze from an OCD point of view and what you can do about it, right? So,
Well, I actually wrote back to this saying, like, the good news is that you're kind of forced to treatment or
yeah,
shame. Like,
yeah,
this is not one of those ones where you can hide in a corner and then loop your thoughts and
no,
like people just think you're daydreaming.
yeah,
If you have this, you're motivated to solve it.
yeah. I mean, and this one, I mean, and this is the thing that sucks about OCD is that the treatment is to put yourself through more agony, right? So, so
What
I
it's
mean,
trials by fire. I
yeah,
mean, this. I mean, the good news is we can tell you what to do to get over this. The bad news is it's going to feel like kind of like crawling up a volcanic mountain, like while there's lava with no clothes on. Like it feels
yes,
terrible. You would want to like ratchet up. Like you can get to where
oh
I'm
yeah,
at,
yeah,
doing this, but it sucks. The way,
yeah. Yeah, it sucks. I mean, the thing this person needs to do is to, you know, like on purpose, deliberately don't scan the counter when he or she leaves, like, or whatever it is, and then walk out the store and have that feeling, as you said, of going up the volcano naked and going home and sitting with that as long as they can, like that, you know, that's kind of,
if yeah, it's really trial by fire, and then I would do a hierarchy,
yeah,
or you can just do this moment by moment because you can't escape this. Like, I have to do this moment by moment,
yeah, no,
and
that's right.
yeah, and really what it is just think like, okay, what can I practice with? I mean, I did it. I had it with like forgetting clothes in the dryer, and so I would like leave a sock in
Yeah,
overnight in
okay,
like a shared dryer,
right,
and then just be like just horrified,
yeah,
like just because it's so weird. It's like a sock, where you might lose a sock,
mm,
but really you're just training yourself so later on you can actually live because we're just sensitive to uncertainty. So Grayson says you have to learn how to cope with potentially forgetting or lose something. You know, we
Yep.
don't like
Yep.
we just give you the truth. It sucks in now, but it's great later. He
Yep.
says you're not to check to see if anything was left behind and just force mental rehearsal into the background. So I think that's as many. There's not much else to say. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too where we talk about themes, or where this person, for whatever reason, their OCD is locked onto this scenario at the cash register, right? Whereas someone else is worrying about checking the stove. This person, I don't know, but they may not worry about the stove. So
Not
why
yet.
is what? Yeah, I've just introduced that for them, so I'm sorry. I apologize. But the point is that you're fixated and all your time and thinking and worrying about whether you forgot something at the cashier. But meanwhile, you're not worrying about the stove, right? So why is yours theme about the cashier more important than the person who doesn't worry about that, but looks at the stove all day? You're both wasting time. You're just doing it on your OCD is locked onto different things, and that's where the content, as we said before, is garbage, right? So it's the way
Yeah.
that you are spending all this time, worrying about something which you could be using that time to be way more productive doing something else.
The Brain Lock book really nails it here. He talks about, whoever wrote it talks about that really this is garbage.
Yeah.
And even who's the famous aviator? The like billionaire. He couldn't buy his way out. There's Leonardo DiCaprio plays him in some movie, and he just
Oh
goes
yeah.
insane on OCD. And he even him with billions couldn't buy his way out.
No.
Someone here left a message. I find it a little amusing because it speaks to the people who are new to this. We have a comment saying, "I'm a victim of OCD." Maybe now, like if you keep up with treatment, you'll be a victor.
Oh yeah.
It is trial by fire, and at the end, you're a warrior. At the beginning, it's like boot camp.
It's exactly. And before we just move on to the next one, to this person, I would say there will come a day when you will go to, if you practice, like in terms of just start small with maybe don't check your bag or don't check the counter, or just pick one thing you're going to do each time. There's going to come a day when you're going to go shopping and you're going to be past this. The treatment works. It does. It sucks. It's hard work, but you got to treat it like anything else that, often to be successful at something, you got to put in the hard work. So you got to put in the work and you'll get the results. And I know it works. I know you know it works, and we know many other people.
I should mention this person did tell me that she's not on any medication, and
Yeah.
I should mention that of course this is hard. Almost everyone with OCD is on medication just
Yep.
to be able to do the treatment. It's so hard.
Yep. Yeah. I'm on medication. I've been on medication for almost 10 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, because she mentioned to me privately, like, I don't think I could do the treatment. We'll get to it later. I think I put it later in the
Yeah.
script here. But like, well, of course not. Like, this is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And it's emotionally extremely painful. Actually, this is a great segue because the next little thing here is
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah.
And I'll just read a few things that were written in with the comments. And people wrote in saying, please keep my name confidential. As you know, with OCD, I'm so ashamed, which like it's heartbreaking because now that we're past the shame like
Yeah.
bridge, I mean, I was obviously ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know at first. And then later this person says it goes against, this belief we want to be perfect. I feel a sense of responsibility to make sure. She was tagging on with insecurity of like, do I have everything about losing something? I just think shame is such a big part of this. It's a big step forward to, message a page like ours, but really getting over the idea that we're supposed to be perfect, like we're not supposed to have like a defect. Like, do you want to speak to that? Because I could rant, but
It's a massive part of it, as you said. And I certainly felt a lot of shame in the beginning. And yeah, no one knew I had OCD. Like, I mean, apart from a couple very close, like my wife and close family members, like not even my parents, like for a long time, like didn't know. Because yeah, I thought there was something wrong with me. Like, before I knew I had OCD, I had it, but I didn't know really what it was. And And even then, after when I had it, um, I would go to work where we had a lot of talks about mental health and stuff and the importance of, drop the stigma and all this. And there's no way I was telling anyone at work that I had OCD, like there's no, whereas now I've arrived at a point where, I'm here talking to you, and people, work know about it, and I'm just open about it. And I've accepted that, there's nothing wrong with having this. It's like having anything else. Like it's,
a big part of this is like having such high standards that it's
yes.
like inhuman.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the OCD. Our standards are through the roof, compared to how most people live their lives, right? So like that idea that we have to be good and responsible. Often I think OCD hits people who are more empathetic, towards others. So often it's hitting the good people, right? The people who don't.
I would put us at like 90% empaths.
Yes.
I've met some, people that I'm not a fan of with OCD, but 90% are like, did I hurt your feelings? Like maybe I did something wrong. Like,
yes.
Maybe I should go out of my way to help someone. So like most of us, it's a morality issue. And we're going to get to that really soon. But then, there's a small minority of, they're more afraid that they would look bad, like that. So I think humility and acceptance and courage are like the biggest things you can have. The humility of, well, I have flaws, being able to be like, I'm not, one of my go-to jokes is just like how other people have hair and like how nice it must be. And like, this is a leap above that. But I think, humility, courage, obviously for the treatment, and whatever else I said, I forgot. Do you remember?
The only thing I would add to that is, because it fits with the empath's kind of theme, is self-compassion. Like, so we're so compassionate towards others. Oh, if someone else came to us and told us, imagine if someone else, good friend, came to you and described that they had OCD or some other kind of mental illness or whatever, like, what would you say? What would you do? Well, most of us would probably be pretty compassionate and understanding and tell them like, hey, that's okay. Do you want to talk or talk about treatment? Like there's nothing wrong. Like you're a good person. You just have this disorder. And yet when we come to ourselves, we just beat ourselves up. So,
it's such a hypocritical thing. It's we're so nice to.
So, it's one thing that I learned through our support group, this year was, hey, cut yourself some slack here. Like, be kind to yourself. Don't hold yourself to the same standard as you do to these other people who come to you and feel they've done a bad thing, and you tell them that no, they haven't, or maybe they have, but they're just human. Well, tell yourself you're just human, so that helps a lot.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's get to intrusive thoughts. This is someone just people who are new to this writing in saying unwanted thoughts come to me, and then they just kind of like wait for like us to respond. So that would be an intrusive thought. That's like probably where OCD really begins. Yeah. Like that's the theme or the obsession. Yeah. And then in specific, before we go on to a different theme, there's the idea of false memory. Someone struggling with things that like they might have done in the past. Like let's say whatever crimes or just intrusive things that they might have done in the past. So we can start with intrusive thoughts in general, and then false memory, which is textbook OCD. What do you think?
Well, it's funny, because for intrusive thoughts, I guess two things. Number one is, I guess that's the whole kind of hallmark of OCD in terms of we all as humans, we have thoughts, right? We all have thoughts. Whether you have OCD or not, there's thousands of thoughts going through your head every day. And I would probably say that most of them you can't control. Most of them, they just come in and you're like, where did that come from? And I can't control where that came from. And some of those thoughts you don't like. And so and then if it doesn't go away, it becomes intrusive, because it's like intruding upon, your ability to focus and all that kind of thing. And I can actually give a good example of that, because while I know, looking back now, that I've had OCD probably my whole life, or at least since my teenage years, it didn't really hit me till I was about 30, or late 20s, where I had a real, like it really became a problem. And I was just walking down the street one day. I remember this. I can still remember. I was walking down the street and I was here in Ottawa, and it was a week before I was meant to go to Australia. That's where I'm from. And I had this thought into my head that said, oh, but if you go to Australia, you're going to be, you know, on the Aboriginal people, the Indigenous people there, the Aboriginals, you're going to be on their land. And like we white people took it from them. And so you're a bad person for doing that, right? And you're not allowed to be there, like, because it's not your land, right? And I went, what? Like, you know, I just kind of thought, what?
It's like that's like an intrusive thought, just like knocking, being like, I'm an intrusive thought, like, and then
like, I'm empathetic to the plight of Indigenous peoples in Australia or any other else, but you know, I'm not responsible for the last 200 years of Australian history, or you know what I mean. But I took that on. I decided to take that on. Like that was going to be like, and that whole trip, I remember, I just every day. I couldn't enjoy anything because my brain was telling me, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to be here. You're not allowed to have, and then it went to, you're not allowed to have a glass of water because people in Africa don't have water. So why should you? And so that's how my OCD really started. So you want to talk about intrusive thoughts, like just going boom, you know?
This is like, okay, what was the example? Let's see. Okay, really intrusive, horrible things that make me sick. Check. False memory. This isn't even a memory. This is just like I like the quote that like guilt and shame are for things that you've done.
Yeah.
Not for things you haven't done.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
but like we're so susceptible to guilt and shame. It's like, well, so other people did this, so I should suffer. And so you went and just suffered through your trip. And like this person's like, I'm worried about something I've done. And you're like, I'm worried about something I haven't done.
Yeah, exactly. You know? So, and that's again, now, I mean, I don't, that thought like doesn't bother me now. Like it's weird. Like I said, I've morphed on to contamination, and then I look back, I definitely had relationship OCD. So yeah, the themes can change, but it's key. Like the key thing for me with intrusive thoughts, and if you have more pure like a more just, you know, mental kind of thoughts that you don't like, it's not something which you touch or stuff, it's still the same, and it's how you respond to that thought that really matters. It's if you give that thought power, if you engage with that thought, you're going to be in trouble, and then you're just going to get into the same cycle and loop that we do with someone who washes their hands. Like if you just keep thinking about it, it's like just going back to the bathroom to wash your hands another time.
Right. I just want to read a Grayson quote. He says, figuring out what these thoughts mean about you, this is about the next thing, so I'll just wait, is contrary to the treatment goal. The treatment goal is learning to live with uncertainty. Like you don't know that in past lives you didn't do all those terrible things.
Hey, you know, it's possible.
So now I just want to make sure that, because the person asked the question, just a really direct answer. It's just something I've dealt with where you don't know if you did something terrible or not. You certainly have the emotional feeling of, did you do something terrible? Then you don't know. Then you feel compelled to ask people who might know, and for them to say you did it or you didn't do it. And then obviously if they knew anything about OCD, which they almost certainly don't, they would say, I don't know. I don't want to give you reassurance. Because the goal of treatment is to live with the uncertainty. So the way through it is emotional pain, and that is the emotional pain is accepting that you might have done whatever it is that's causing you emotional pain. You don't know. It might come up to haunt you, and it might not.
Totally. That's totally it. You have to, it's not trying to figure out whether you did or you didn't, right? Like as you said, it's just saying, yeah, maybe I did. And then moving on with your day and being okay, teaching your brain that that's an okay way to live. Like, and you're going to get swamped with anxiety when you do that. But in the long run, it'll come down like it does. It passes. And the next time it'll be a little less. Like that's, and it's true. I can speak. It works because I've been there. I've lived through that. Like in terms of having excruciating anxiety about, oh my God, I'm not going to do anything about this situation, and I'm not going to find out, and someone might get cancer, and I'm just going to have to wear that. And now my brain is stronger than it was a year ago.
Well, you know, because well, because we've had treatment before all of this kind of uncertainty and contamination fear and financial uncertainty happened. Um, I was prepared for this. I moved to Spain in the
Yeah,
middle of
yeah,
all of this. So um, someone's going to question, I'm in a tough spot. I no longer have anxiety, but the thoughts are there, just
yeah,
feeling depressed. Yeah, a big part of this is morale, like living to fight another day.
yeah,
If you don't have anxiety anymore, just be grateful. Like a lot of people who are messaging in have so much anxiety, they're, can't stop compulsions.
yeah.
So definitely count your wins. Gratitude's a big deal. And then, so anyway, I just want to make sure that's what an intrusive thought is whatever you're terrified about. And not being sure, like false memory, like that's a trick your brain does.
It
Would
does
you want
to,
to speak to
well, it
that?
doesn't. I don't really have that, but I know it happens to all of us. But I would just treat it the same way as an intrusive
You just
thought.
don't know.
You just don't know. So like, you just have to say, I don't know. Like, and then instead of, I mean, like my therapist said to me once, because I talked to him about some situation. I mean, and I honestly cannot even remember it now. And that's why how OCD works. Like you're so, worked up about something, and then 3 weeks later, at least I can't even remember what it was. So I was worried about somehow contaminating like something where my daughter would touch it and she would get cancer. And, my therapist said to me, well, instead of trying to figure out whether she will, and you talk to a doctor and should she get a test and da 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 da, da, he said, maybe she will get cancer. He said, maybe she will. And maybe it'll be because of what you did. And he said, now, if that happens, I'm pretty sure, though, that you would be there for your daughter, and that you would get the best treatment you could for her at that time, and that you would comfort her, and that you would cope with the situation, and it wouldn't be good, but you would get through it. And, and it was like, oh, I probably would do those things.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's kind of heavy. A lot of us are worried about socks and dryers, but
no, I know. So, but I'm saying the reason I wanted to say that if you can do that even for someone having cancer, then you can do it for socks in the dryer. So,
or leaving your keys at the cash.
yeah.
Anyway, I probably shouldn't have made a joke there, but
No, it's fine.
it's a perfect segue
Yeah.
because we got some heavy questions.
Yeah.
We are now moving to the sexual obsessions portion of our
Yep.
Q&A.
Yeah.
We got questions about HOCD and POCD. So these fall under sexual obsessions,
Yeah.
and they're very similar to violent obsessions in kind of how they come and how to treat them. And HOCD is short for homosexual obsessive compulsive disorder. POCD, I'm pretty sure, is pedophilic obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
And the other questions before we just attack it all is false attraction
Yep.
and thoughts feeling real. Now, this is like these things are super. The first thing I found out that was helpful to me is that like these are not really, these are like hushed about, but this is incredibly popular OCD problem. And
Yep.
I think it's because it's so taboo. Nobody wants to talk about it. And then they find out, oh, pretty much everyone with OCD, like this content will be cycled through,
Yep.
kind of like your garbage cleaner thing. It's like
Yep.
everyone
Yep.
usually worries about this. Um, Before I break them down, did you want to jump in edgewise?
Uh, I mean, I have had this theme of OCD more in my early 20s. Actually, probably, and then I went through it for a few months, a little bit. But it's always been a minor thing. It's never been something which has really bothered me. But I've had it, and especially the HOCD. I haven't really had POCD, but I've had HOCD for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Go. Why don't you go ahead and then?
Absolutely. So I think the major, just trying to, because people message in and they're as general as possible because a lot of this is horrific.
Yeah.
I think the major concerns about HOCD is, am I gay or am I straight or do I want a married woman or do I want someone I'm married?
Yeah.
I think that's it. And then those are the main, maybe we should break that down first. I'll just read what if you're struggling with this, I recommend Grayson's book. He's got a big chapter on this.
Mm.
But if you really want to cut to the chase, he says, figuring out what these thoughts mean about your sexuality is contrary to the treatment goal of learning to live with uncertainty. He also has he lists three things that if you check any of them, you know, you should you should get professional help,
Right.
which is, you know, if I'll just read them in case people
Yeah.
aren't sold on the book.
Yeah.
If you have no doubts that molesting others or engaging in any kind of said violence would be fun and arousing, and you wish to fulfill these fantasies, and he says no doubts. I mean, most of us have doubts.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, if you hear voices or receive messages encouraging you to carry out such acts. Or number three, if you have a history of engaging in any of these behaviors. If any of these descriptions fit you, this part of the book's not for you, and it could be harmful to you and others. But the other thing is so this the most common of these is the obsession of possibly having homosexual desires,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be like, I don't know, because this is where we talked about content. It's like,
It's still garbage. It's, I mean, there's a few things here I think that to touch on. Number one, as you mentioned, I'm glad you read those things out because, you know, it can be obviously if it's serious, but then seek professional help for sure. But I think it's common knowledge that, you know, us as humans, most of us probably have these kinds of thoughts, you know, weird kind of sexual thoughts, and whether you think you're gay or straight or whatever, that's probably pretty common amongst all people, like whether you have.
Well, I want to break in because Grayson wrote that. The page before is the content of your thoughts is normal. The real problem is your attempt to stop thinking the thoughts or prove they aren't true. And HOCD, we've got a mutual friend, like this has tormented her for like years. And it's contamination, I know, is tormented someone else I know for decades, maybe. You know, anyway, I'm not sure what else there is to really say. Like, people will say, like, look, I don't know if I like it, you know, and I think that's a brain trick because usually there's like a doubt. And so you've got the intrusive thought of whatever shakes you, like whatever, because like there's a lot of different ways.
I mean, for me, I think it's because this is all tied in with kind of, you know, human sexuality is quite complex, is that, you know, I would say that if you think about this, like, you know, and because, you know, it's possible, it's perfectly possible and perfectly fine and normal that, you know, you may not be 100% straight, you know, whatever, like, and that's fine. Like, you know, there's no, but because it's such a taboo subject too, some people might think it's not fine, or some people might not want to have those desires or whatever, right? Even if they do. And that's something separate from OCD. I feel like that you have to work out with your own sexuality, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you just have to accept who you are and work on that, right? But
well, what's wrong is torturing yourself over thoughts.
Well, exactly. Well, I was going to say, but then what's wrong is if this is something, and eventually you're going to get to the point where you either accept it or you don't. And if you do, that becomes part of your life, fine. But if you're just as you said, churning through, there's no real new information, and you're just going over like again and again and again, questioning whether you are or you aren't, that becomes, now you're in the OCD realm, and this could be, it's the same as any other OCD theme. So what should you do about it? Nothing. Like, you should
like the metaphors, like everyone gets past the hot potato of like the intrusive thought.
Yeah.
If you have OCD, you hold it and it hurts, and you just keep holding it for months, years, or whatever. Okay, so this was building up because the person says ERP has worked so far for, I think he said HOCD, but he says it's more scary for POCD and trans OCD, and he's been struggling with that. I would say that, like we opened with, there is content, and then there is process, and these pieces of content are harder. It's hard to say exactly what it is. I would guess that the intrusive thought is desire towards children, or desire towards trans, or maybe I'm trans, and I think those are hot potatoes. You drop them. You know, most people are like, maybe.
I think it's even more than that. It's like, oh, desires towards children and everything, and therefore I'm a really bad person.
Yeah, the morality aspect.
And I remember reading once, like with OCD, that there's usually like a core fear. Like there's a few core fears. One of them is that you're a bad person, like, you know. And so one of the approaches that you can take, which I'm kind of playing with at the moment, is like, so because I feel like, oh, it's my fault, I'm going to cause harm to my kids. And so again, insert, I'm attracted to kids, I'm going to, you know, I'm a pedophile or whatever, and I'm a bad person. So you have that thought, right? You have that thought. That's the core fear. So that's the key question for you. And the thing that you need to do about that question is say, that question just exists. Like, I think I did this last time or whatever. It exists like this pen exists, right? It's just there, but you don't need to do anything about it, right? So what do you
Well,
do
it's like
about that?
you have to let go of the importance of it.
Exactly. So you say, what do I do about that question or concern that I'm a bad person and that you don't do anything. You just move on with your day, right? Because don't give it any importance, right? Like, so if as soon as you start to ruminate and give it meaning, you're stuck, because you will never get out of that, because you're always going to come up with another reason of why it could be true. So you can either spend all your time doing that, or you can choose to say, like, you know what? It just exists like this pen exists, and I'm now going to go and eat it, make a sandwich. Like, and while I'm still having the thought, and I'm going to have to feel anxious because I'm not trying to figure it out. So I'm going to feel anxious. That's the treatment. It sucks. But that's, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, most of our advice is go feel the emotional pain.
Yep.
Because you don't know, and searching for the answer of do you know is keeping you in like this kind of quagmire. But if you just as soon as you start letting go of, oh, I need to know and this is scary, then it's almost like now I can move on.
Exactly, because you want to say, let's say you've had, you know, these thoughts for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. The cycle of rumination about trying to figure out whether you know I would challenge anyone to say that helped them. Like, did you get any closer to figuring it out?
I know the answer. The answer would be it helped me feel better temporarily.
Well, yeah, exactly. It did, but that's, I mean, how long do you want it? But then you also were occupied. What are some other things you like to do in life? And how often did you do those over the last 3 months, right?
So this is perfect because now the big topic is avoidance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you just avoid treatment and you just keep compulsing and ruminating and you know, like, it's because you're avoiding treatment. If you do treatment, then you get better and you get, in fact, more effective. You know, I'm handling more uncertainty than I would have dreamed of now that I've done treatment, because we kind of signed up or were assigned the uncertainty training, and we weren't allowed to escape. So if it's time for you to, okay, so someone wrote in about avoidance. I'll just read it.
Yeah.
I know you shouldn't avoid things, but my God, it triggers me. And before I had OCD, I used to love nothing more than a night out. Then when I was diagnosed in 2016, everything changed. Okay, so I broke this down into healthy avoidance and unhealthy avoidance. And maybe this is controversial, but I think it's fine to avoid things that are bad for you. She had also asked, like, what's the deal with drinking? Mm-hmm. Now, Margot's done a bunch of posts about how OCD gets worse when you're tired. Yep. So mornings are often harder. Yep. I will often be checking things at between 7:30 and 7 or 8. You know, yep. It's hard to get out of that. Yep. So she says, does drinking make it worse? I get horrible intrusive thoughts the day after, like, did I cheat or did I commit crimes? And it's like, well, it sounds like it makes it much worse for you. Personally, I don't drink because I don't want my brain to slow down and then be more susceptible to being pulled into the like, I'm not sure what to call this, but like whatever that pool is, that whirlpool that pulls you in. I would recommend not drinking. What do you think?
Well, I have the same thing. Alcohol definitely makes my OCD worse. I've noticed that pattern. I don't typically drink a lot anyway, so it's not really a big deal. But even if I just have a couple of glasses of wine, I can tell my brain is scanning for threats more. Like, um, and it's too bad because I enjoy a glass of wine, and but I also, that's again, it's about just knowing, you have to accept your own, you have to make your own boundaries.
Right. Right. So the person wrote in, sorry to cut you off, but she says, I have this awful false memory, and every time I drink, I'm a damn it. I've confessed to people and admitted I've done something terrible, even though I haven't, and it scares me. I'm having a massive spike that I told someone I did something awful, and she knows the person. And it's like, I think a healthy avoidance would be an avoidance of drinking in that case.
Yeah, it's funny. You can look at that two ways. You can kind of say, or do you drink more as an exposure? Like,
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I'll give you that. But
but I think there's nothing wrong with, I agree. There's nothing wrong with, I would say, like when it comes to drinking too. And if you're recognizing that this false memory is OCD and that it gets worse when you drink, then yeah, don't drink. Like, I mean, not because you're avoiding it, but because, like who wants to have these intrusive thoughts? It's not pleasant. So if you have a way of cutting those off, like, I don't have
well,
an
I
issue.
would say she says she's having a hard time right now.
Yeah.
So I would say don't drink now.
Yeah.
And later, if you're going to do a planned
Yes, that's good.
exposures,
Yeah.
that's very different. If
Exactly.
I think it's healthy to avoid things like drugs and like illegal drugs and
Exactly.
and crimes and stuff. So I do think there's a healthy avoidance. Like if you're suffering and alcohol makes you worse, like now is not the time to do more exposure. Like
Totally agree. I agree totally. But I think it makes sense to do it, like you said, as a planned exposure in the future. Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
right, like I really can't stand swallowing pills. And I don't need more exposure right now. I'm kind of running on adrenaline, so I am not making it so I have to take those. I do have to do a COVID test, and I'm not excited about it, but I don't have a choice. So on that day, I'm going to try and be as easy to me as possible. Because I don't know if they're going to probe me in the nose or like make me bleed or like make me hold hands with someone at the hospital. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we got another avoidance question.
Yeah.
I put it under a kind of good avoidance, bad avoidance. It's about the news, really. She saw a news article that triggered her a lot, and thinking like, well, what if I did that? What if it was me? Yep. And so personally, I limit news as much as possible because it tends to be negative and sensational because they sell ads through eyeballs. And so I think it can go both ways. I think if you're in a spike and you know that news stories would trigger your false memory and morality OCD, well, then wait. If you're going to do an exposure, then plan it. But if you're like in hell right now from overexposure and flooding like having too much anxiety, then I think it's healthy to avoid it and live to fight another day.
Oh yeah, I think that's, this whole thing about ERP is you can only do what you can handle. Like there's no point, I know people talk about flooding and stuff and just exposing yourself to the nth degree, but I don't know. I've never done that and it doesn't sound very pleasant.
It's not very compassionate to
No, it isn't. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've got my limits. You know what? I can tolerate reading the news for 5 minutes today, but I'm not doing it for an hour. But then as long as I think that you have an awareness that, look, avoiding the news long term is not the answer, because this will never go away. You're always going to feel this. Then every time you read the news, you're going to have these thoughts about whether you're going to do this horrible thing. So I think you do need to have some kind of strategy or plan to work up to be able to read the news, because that's a normal human thing to do. You should be able to read the news, so and if you can't, then I think you should figure out a plan to
well, I would say, I would say she's obviously having a hard time now. So just limit triggers until you're at a baseline and feeling confident. Make a hierarchy and then make a plan and get your exposures to go up. And you don't have to be watching CNN for all day, every day.
Exactly. No, that makes perfect sense. I think for sure.
Now, unhealthy avoidance is something I do, and I think a lot of us
do it all the time. Yeah.
I just made a quick list of like, it is unhealthy to avoid managing your finances, rooms of your house, knobs on your stove, knobs on your doors. I would say that, so there really is like being really smart about avoidance. Like, yes, avoid things that are too intense or just bad ideas. But also like be conscious that, like people without OCD are not touching doorknobs now. So like,
Yep.
be know where you are, and but like I'm touching doorknobs.
Oh, I do that all the time now because I used to have super avoid, like I would avoid stuff like even turning on the light switch. I'd always do it with my elbow or whatever, and stuff like that. And I'd have thoughts in my head as I approached the light switch, like, oh, hang on, there's a reason that you can't touch this light switch. And I'd go through the three reasons, and therefore I'd use my elbow, right? And so now, though, whenever I find myself with those thoughts, and I go, nope, boom, like use my fingers, like don't avoid, you know, do the opposite. And so, because that's just OCD. Like that's just OCD telling me, there's some danger here when turning
Okay,
lights shouldn't really be a dangerous activity. So,
I mean, pretty soon people are going to be turning on the lights and watching the news and like
yeah,
drinking, having a drink.
yeah,
Think of all the exciting things you can do when you're treated. Now that was maybe not the nicest way to segue into the saying this is very, very difficult.
yes,
Um, you know, uh, and it's weird too. Like it is weird, but people without OCD, I see all the time, like not touching, like taking tissue and opening doors, and
yep,
um, you know, I'll just read someone wrote in, dealing with this is so hard, and saying with, live with uncertainty, accept things may happen. You don't need to know everything, and probability versus possibility. Like the idea, it's all easier said than done. Like I'll, pretty much all of our advice is like it's gonna hurt, but if you can manage it, do your exposure as soon as possible, and then plan your next.
yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, I don't know exactly for you, but like in terms of, I mean, I live with this every day. It's not like I'm
Oh
here
yeah,
like, oh, I'm cured and I'm telling everyone else, like, go and do this and you're going to be fine. Like, in terms of like, it's hard, like, and I deal with it every day. And I'm still like, on the road to recovery, like whatever that means, even like sometimes I wonder, what would it be like not to have OCD? Like my brain would not be me. Like, I don't know, like it's kind of weird. Like, so, um, but I mean, compared to where I was like a couple of years ago, I am so much better in terms of my ability to tolerate uncertainty. And when that thought enters to say, no, don't engage, you don't need to know, and then go move on. And then 5 minutes later, that thought has disappeared. Whereas that a year ago, like that thought would have hung around for days. Like, so, but I still have thoughts that do hang around for a couple of days. Like, I still get bad triggers. Like, so, but I do believe that all the work I've done in terms of putting myself through that emotional pain of exposure and anxiety has enabled me to now be able to like put my brain in a position where some of those thoughts and a lot of those thoughts don't last very long. And
yeah.
so, yeah,
So I would agree. I still live with it kind of day to day. I'm getting a little bit of hand washers, hands even. So
yep,
like washing my
yep,
hands a bit too much.
yep,
So I like that we do this because we do this video because it helps us. As much as last time I did the OCD diagnosis test, I diagnosed within general population. It was
yep,
still on the high end,
yep,
and it was, and I still have to deal with this, like
yep,
from when I wake up to like
yep,
when I go to bed, like
yep,
avoidance and
yep,
checking for certainty.
yep,
I'll just finish reading some of these quotes. She says, I can handle the anxiety because I do the checks that relieves me. But if I had to do ERP, there's no way I could sit with the anxiety and move on with my day without ruminating. So it's easier for me to do the check and move on. I've developed so many mechanisms that aren't healthy, but they help me check quickly and save time. But it's nuts. Like I feel I'm afraid I'll never get rid of it, which is a big theme,
yep,
because I need security and I'm too afraid to give it up. I have a pretty successful life given the circumstances, but I can be so much more. In order to stop checking, I have to tell myself, if I don't stop checking and walk away, God will make sure something terrible happens to my family.
Wow.
So I read that out because so much of that can be challenged with like exposure,
Yeah.
but it highlights like this is extremely difficult, and avoiding treatment is hell.
There's a lot in what you just read out. There's a lot in there. Yeah, that's, like I think the fact that the person took the time to write in and then talked about the line for me was, she said, I could be so much more. And that was sad to hear that, because that's what OCD takes away from you.
Look, here's the thing is like I could still be so much more, but I still was able to do a lot of crazy things. But I'm with you. I read it all out because it's like that's all of us. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Oh yeah. No, exactly. That was really powerful. Like, so, because yeah, that is all of it. We are constantly doing these little compulsions, even they might be small, and bigger ones, but because we feel we can't tolerate, the alternative.
And that's the thing is, if when you have the courage, you're rewarded for it.
Oh,
Like when you and the it's hard to see people like on the cliff being like, I want to jump off, and like I almost have the faith to know that like I can land in the water and like be all right. And it because it hurts. It hurts to avoid treatment.
it does. It does. And, so it's interesting. And you said the faith is sometimes, I think this came up in support group once, is, to accept uncertainty. Sometimes you also just have to say, I'm going to have faith in the universe and just move on, and that all this stuff I'm trying to control, like it's so much bigger than me, and
Yeah, the humility and the faith aspect,
yeah,
it's addressed really well in Brain Lock.
right.
I think, it's the biggest thing really is there's hope, there's courage, and there's faith. And if without them, there's just fear and pain.
Yeah.
And but it's super hard. Like,
Oh,
if I
yeah.
was really good at this, like I wouldn't have, red marks on my hands from washing my hands.
Nope.
Like
Yep.
I've been avoiding some things,
Oh
but
yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
hopefully I'll get to them today. Well, okay, well I think that's great for that section. And I just wanted to talk about community before we left.
Yeah.
This is grown out of the Ottawa community, which turned into the Canadian community, which is now turning into an international community.
Yeah.
Someone, Joe Polish wrote this. I thought it was great. If you're fighting a silent battle, so that's pretty much all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find someone else you can connect with.
Yeah.
You like a lot of people have been writing in saying this feels so much better. No, because we're like 2% of the population when it comes to like full-blown OCD. I guess like 80% of the population has aversion to contamination OCD.
Yeah.
But when it really comes down to intrusive thoughts, contamination OCD is like washing your hands. When it comes down to I'm having vivid, intrusive, false, or maybe true, like impulses for immoral behavior.
Yeah.
Like that's not should I get a vaccine and wash my hands and wear a mask? Like that's
No, exactly.
like
It's very distressing. That's the thing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, no, it's very like OCD at its core. If you have real OCD, like it's very, very distressing. It's a very distressing disorder. Yeah.
I just want to read a quote someone wrote in. My OCD is really bad right now, and pages like yours make me feel so much more comfortable with it, knowing that I'm not the only one struggling with it, which is like, that hurts. Like to hear it's like, for the longest time, she was like, I'm alone, like with these terrible thoughts, like no one else is like me. So obviously connecting with others has been huge for me and you as well. That's why we did it.
Yeah.
You're, I think, still, I'm not, because I'm in woods of Spain now. But I'm guessing it's still very helpful to have a weekly support group.
Oh yeah, I'm there almost every week. Again, it's just great. It's just great connecting with other people, as you said, that you're become, you know, you're not this outcast, this weird person who's something wrong with you. Like, you know, that you're you're just a person, and there's other people like you, and it definitely helps for sure to connect and hear other people's stories, and then to be able to say to someone else, like, oh, to see someone else too that maybe they're doing a little bit worse than you, and so like you can give them encouragement that, you know, they're going to get better, and that you know, you can help them. And so then it becomes more than just you and trying to solve your own problems, but also seeing that you can help others. And I find that that helps me deal with my own ECD, and it reminds me to practice what I preach too, you know. So when I tell other people to, you know, oh, just, you know, you have to go through the pain, well, that means I got to do that to myself too. You know, so
well, I'm very independent by nature, you know, very solitary. And it was a bit of a shock to me that this included like some things you can't do alone.
yeah.
And, you know, some things have to be healed in a group. And so anyway, I'm delighted. A lot of people, we've gotten messages in like that. And that was the whole purpose of taking this from local to international. So did you have any final things to say before I wrap?
No, I think this was a real good conversation. We touched on some pretty good, I think pretty good themes, pretty good issues. Hope and recovery, those are my two words. So putting those out
And
there.
and uncertainty. The flip side of uncertainty is possibility.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, I mean, today was a heavy hitter. I think we had to work up to it because some of these things are difficult to like and delicate.
Yeah.
But when enough people wrote in, I was like, I guess we have to.
Yeah, and no, we got to talk about them because they're out there, they exist, and there's nothing wrong with them. Like that's the thing, to take the taboo away and make people feeling like less shame, and you know, there's nothing wrong with being human.
Yeah, and just to know there's other people and these thoughts are normal and there
Yeah,
is like a game plan out of there.
yeah,
It's huge.
yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
great. Well, thanks, Matt. And then
Yeah,
to everyone watching, congratulations. You just took a big step to getting better. You listened to an hour of Matt and I break down some of the bigger, harder aspects of OCD. If you could, I'm trying to get this here. Please follow us on all our accounts. It would really help us. We've got a new YouTube channel. We've got a Facebook page and a group. We've got the Instagram account, and we've got our Twitter account. And if you have any questions, just like we answered today, please message or comment them in. And we're looking to do this every Friday, and we can answer them. So thank you very much. Thank you, Matt. And we'll talk to you guys later. Oh, and it's always free from OCD.
free from OCD. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye.